Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Nice to see you guys here. So what I'm going to do is share with you guys the 5 precepts. This is a householder's guide to daily practice. These are 5 impactful decisions that you could make either wisely or unwisely, and it's going to produce either wholesome results or unwholesome results, depending on how you make these decisions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha to help you be able to see what he taught, and then I'm going to apply it to day-to-day life so you can see how to apply it in your day-to-day life. Oftentimes people think that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. This sounds like a bunch of rules. It sounds like a bunch of commandments. It sounds like black and white. You're going to see as I share with you, the Buddha didn't speak that way. And these things aren't black and white. You'll be able to see how to navigate this more clearly. So whenever you're learning something like the 5 precepts or anything else around moral conduct, it's important that you remember that what the Buddha is doing is he's helping you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma, this cause and effect or action and result. They're not rules. They're not commandments. He's not trying to force you or guilt you or shame you into doing anything specific. It's up to you to decide for your own life what it is you would like to do. Even me, I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. It's your life. I'm just sharing with you the teachings of the natural law of Kamma, and you can decide for yourself what you choose to do. But based on what you choose to do, we can predict what the outcome would be based on understanding the natural law of Kamma. So there's this cause and effect, or this action and result that you're going to experience. And when you have the wisdom of these natural laws, then you're going to naturally make wise decisions and experience improved results. So here I'll share with you guys this first precept that the Buddha shares. It says, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So what the Buddha is teaching you here is to not cause harm to other beings through taking their life. Because when you're killing a being, then harm is going to come to you. People are going to be interested in harming you if you choose to kill other beings. So here, when he's teaching you, remember, you're learning, you're investigating, you're examining. So when you see words like this, the first thing you should ask yourself is, what is he really teaching? He's talking about not killing living beings. So the first thing you should ask yourself is, well, what's a living being? How do I determine what a living being is? Right? So the Buddha actually has a teaching on this. It's called the 5 aggregates. He teaches you how to figure out what a living being is. He talks about these 5 things that every living being is going to have. A living being is going to have physical form. They're going to have feelings. There's going to have perceptions, something called volitional formations, and a consciousness. So I'll explain these to you. What physical form is that the physical form, because you can reflect on this as I'm teaching you, because you know you're a living being, right? A living being is going to have physical form, right? You have physical form. A living being is going to have feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. There's going to be certain feelings in the mind, right? Then there's going to be perceptions. What a perception is your views and opinions about the world, the way you look out at the world, the way the world seems to be. Then you're going to have what's called volitional formations. What this is your choices and decisions. A living being is going to have free will. That's going to be able to make their own choices and decisions. That's what volitional formations are. And then there's a consciousness, which is the mind itself. Okay, so form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. So as I mentioned, you can reflect on this and you can see, yeah, you have all 5 of those things. But you can also see a squirrel has that. You can see a bird has those. You can look around the world and you can use this definition of the 5 aggregates that the Buddha shares to help you see that, yes, this holds up. For 2,500 years, it holds up as, yes, this is what a living being is. Then you can take something that's not a living being. This will help you to further reflect on this teaching to be able to independently verify that it's true. Because you know that this chair that I'm sitting in, this isn't a living being. So you ask yourself, does it have physical form? Does it have physical form? Yeah, it does, right? Does it have feelings? Does it have certain feelings? Does it experience happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration? Does this chair get sad or frustrated? No, it doesn't, right? Does it have perceptions? Does it have views or opinions about the world, right? Does it have a view or opinion that it's too hot or too cold here in the room? No, it doesn't have that, right? Does it have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself back down? No, it can't do that, right? It doesn't have volitional formations or choices and decisions. It doesn't have any kind of free will. Does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, it doesn't, right? So you can see that this definition of the five aggregates, it describes what a living being is, because anytime you're causing harm to a living being, this is going to come back to you. It's all going to come back to you. So the Buddha is guiding you here to not cause harm to a living being. And the five aggregates is something that you learn as you grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. But in the meantime, if you would like to use kind of a little bit of a shorthand way of thinking about it, I provide that here. That a being is typically going to be from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. But this isn't always true. So that's why this isn't the natural law. What the Buddha taught is the natural law, the five aggregates: form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. But this might help you just kind of get started to be thinking about living beings, is that a living being will typically come from an egg, there's going to be a sperm, and there's going to be a consciousness. Okay, so now what you do is you take this precept of living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and you start up looking at certain things that you might need to decide at certain times in your life, and decide, how would you handle this given situation? Of course, in that situation, you're going to take in whatever situation is occurring and make a wise decision in that situation. But we can talk about a few of these so you can see how to apply this precept in any given situation. Because notice what the Buddha isn't sharing. He isn't saying preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's saying. He's saying live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And in some cases, there might be certain things that you do that is living compassionately. In some cases, you might be choosing something different that is still living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So let me show you this with some of these things. These are all intentional killings: euthanasia of human and animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings, and murders. These are all intentional killings. But whether you choose to do these things or not, it's up to you. So let's take one so that you can see how to apply this precept and how it's not black and white, right? And ultimately, everything is always your decision, but you can see how to apply this precept. So if we take this one of termination of pregnancy. Now, some people think of this as a political discussion. I don't think of it that way, because termination of a pregnancy, this is a medical technology that we have, and it's potentially beneficial in some situations. In other situations, it may not be. Ultimately, the decision always comes to the individual person to decide for themselves what they would like to do. But here, let me give you a couple of examples using this where you can see it's not black and white. Let's just say that there's a woman who has a fetus inside of her womb, and we know through medical technology that this fetus is never going to live a viable life outside the womb. And if the woman continues to live with this fetus inside of her womb, she could potentially die herself. Now, if we terminate this, or she chose to terminate this pregnancy, that could be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first being you need to have compassion for is this being, who you are, right? So if you allowed that fetus to continue to grow in the womb and it was threatening your own life, if you didn't remove it, it wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. But then in another situation, maybe somebody is regularly getting pregnant, maybe they're having unprotected sex, they're regularly getting pregnant, and 3, 4, 5, 6 times they're having termination of pregnancy. This is actually going to cause harm to the woman's body. Over time, her uterus and other parts of her body are going to start to have all kinds of difficulties because of having the termination of pregnancy be used as birth control rather than using something else that could help with that situation. So it's not black or white. But whether somebody chooses to terminate their pregnancy or not, it's up to them. It's not up to me to decide for them what they should or shouldn't be doing. But I'm just sharing with you this cause and effect, or action and result, that in one situation where pregnancy is being terminated in order to protect the life of the woman, this is living compassionately for all living beings. But over here, maybe not, where someone's regularly getting pregnant, they're making unwise decisions to have unprotected sex, and maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times they're having abortions. This is going to cause harm to their own body. And that's the cause and effect. But whether they choose to do that or not is up to them. It's their choice. But that's why that occurs, is that there's a certain decision that's being made, which is to have sex. It's being done in such a way that the person's continually getting pregnant, and now this termination of pregnancy is being used repeatedly in order to terminate the birth, and this is going to cause harm to the woman's body. So if a woman came to me or a couple came to me and said, David, should I terminate my pregnancy? I wouldn't say yes or no. That's not my place to make that decision. I would say, well, if you choose to terminate the pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you'll experience. And then it's up to them to decide. I would teach somebody no matter what they chose. My love is unconditional. I love everybody. I have love for each and every person because I'm interested in seeing all beings be well. My interest to help somebody isn't contingent on what they choose to do in their life. Any choices that they make, it's up to them. So whether someone chooses to terminate a pregnancy or does any of these other things, it's up to them. But there is going to be certain consequences as we make certain decisions. So these are things that you would like to think about before you actually make any decision, because there's going to be a consequence that you're going to experience. That's the cause and effect, or the action and result, the results of our decisions. We can take another one here, like war. Let's just say our government tells us, hey, you can go over there and kill those people. We want you to go kill those people. We don't like what they're doing. We want you to go kill them. Well, a government can tell you that, and that's a human law, right? But this natural law of Kamma is functioning at a much higher level. The government might say, go over there and kill those people, and that's fine with us. But if you come over here on our land and you kill these people, we're going to arrest you for murder and we're going to take you to jail. This is a human law, and it's imperfect, so it doesn't function perfectly. And this is why if you go off to war and you fight in war, you're very likely to be killed yourself, right? This is the natural law of Kamma. The human beings can't circumvent the natural law of Kamma. Not only can you potentially be killed, but you can also end up with mental challenges or amputations or injuries. You could end up with being addicted to drugs and alcohol. Oftentimes when soldiers come back from war, they find it very challenging to integrate back into society. They might have difficulties working or maintaining a home or something like this. They might have certain mental challenges. Sometimes soldiers even commit suicide after they come back from war, right? So these are all results of your decisions. So while a government can say, yeah, go over there and kill those people, we're not going to prosecute you for murder, you can't run and hide and escape the results of your decisions. So you're going to need to think through any of these types of things and others where you could potentially be killing another human being, and ask yourself, are you living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings? So then there's other things that students will oftentimes ask me, like this do not resuscitate. I don't know if you guys know what this is. In your country, you might have this where you can go to the government and you can fill out an agreement or a legal contract that tells your relatives that if this body dies, don't bring me back to life. Don't use medical technology to bring me back to life. And if you've done one of those, you're still living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings because you haven't chosen to kill anybody at all. Sometimes students ask me about this because they have one, right, where they've signed this DNR. Well, if you are saying, don't bring me back to life, you haven't actually killed any living being. You're just saying, hey, I'm comfortable with death. Don't use medical technology to bring me back. So in that case, you're still living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. Sometimes people ask me about defense and protection, right? Say you're sleeping in your house, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, and somebody's breaking in through the window of your house. I can guarantee you they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers at 3 a.m. in the morning, right? That's not why they're breaking into your house. They're there to do harm. And what I would suggest for somebody is, if possible, get out, right? Go somewhere else, go to a neighbor's house, call the police. They have the tools, the training, and the techniques to be able to handle that situation. Just get out. But this isn't black and white, because in some situations you can't get out. Maybe you look outside and there's a gang of people in your front yard. Or maybe you look outside and there's a fire, right? And you can't get out. Or maybe they've snuck up on you and you're backed up against the wall. And in this situation, if you had to cause harm to this being in order to protect this being who you are, this would be to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because this person has chosen to cause harm. And now any harm that's coming to them, this is their Kamma. You didn't go outside intentionally looking for this situation to occur, but this person is choosing to come attack you. What I encourage people to do in this situation is to cause as least amount of harm as possible. So if they have a baseball bat, see if you can get a bigger baseball bat, right? If they have some other tool or device, see if you can, take care of the situation with the least amount of harm as possible. But it wouldn't be to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings to just sit there and let somebody beat you up or stab you with a knife or shoot you with a gun. This isn't living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So notice the Buddha doesn't say preserve all life at all cost. So what the unenlightened mind typically wants is it wants this black and white. Just tell me what to do. I want a rule. But moving to a higher consciousness and getting to enlightenment, it isn't black and white. It's not a rule or a commandment. It's being able to take in the variables in any given situation and then making a wise decision in that situation. So you're going to have to look at each situation that's occurring with your wisdom and decide what will be wise in this situation. So, for example, my wife and I, we experienced termites eating our house at one point. And my wife came to me and said, "Hey, we have termites." And I said, "Oh, really? I didn't know that." She's like, "Yeah, you see that door over there? They're eating up our door, and they're eating the house and the concrete and the cement. We should probably take care of this." So what I did is I decided to do some research on the internet and see if there was a way to eradicate termites without killing them. And what I came back with is no, there isn't a way, right? There's no way to get rid of them. So we needed to call somebody to come and take care of the termites. And then they put some poison around the house, and then they ate it and took it back to their nest. And over a 2-year period, it got rid of the termites. Well, if we would have just let these termites eat our home, that's not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because me, my wife, my son, we wouldn't have had a place to live. So this is the problem with being in the animal world, is an animal doesn't have the level of consciousness to realize we should eat this wood over here in the forest because that's not going to hurt anybody. But the animal doesn't have that type of intelligence. As a human being, we can have that kind of intelligence. We know that we can harvest this tree and we're not going to cause any harm to anybody. But an animal doesn't know that. So that's one of the challenges of being in the animal world. And now this harm came to these beings because they were causing harm. So you can live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And in some cases, there might need to be a taking of the life, right? And you can rest assured that the Buddha is not teaching you to preserve all life at all cost. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And in each situation, you're going to need to apply that and figure out what works best for you. Then some people ask me about what they should eat and whether or not eating meat would be unwise. It is wise to eat a vegan plant-based food supply because you're not causing the death of an animal. When you're experiencing the eating of animal flesh, you're actually causing harm because the animal had to die in order to be able to experience that. And now when you're eating animal flesh, it's going to affect the health of the body. This is why when we eat animal flesh, we have more disease and sickness and illness in the body. And you'll notice that not only that, but when you're eating animal flesh, you're also eating the toxins and the drugs and the hormones that are in the animal flesh. They've taken wild fish out of streams in America where it's supposed to be very clean running stream, and they've tested the flesh of the fish and they found all kinds of substances, like 90 different substances. They found cocaine, they found antidepressants, they found all kinds of things in the flesh of the wild fish because us human beings have been flushing that down the toilet. It's gotten into the water table and now it's polluting the flesh of the animal. So even in a wild fish, it's got these different toxins. And when you're eating that, it's polluting your own mind, it's polluting the body. And then there's farmers who are putting antibiotics and growth hormones and things like this into their animals. So when you're eating that flesh, you're not just eating the flesh, you're also eating the drugs and hormones and toxins. So you might decide to look at cleaning up your food supply if you're currently eating meat. Whether you choose to do that or not is up to you. You will notice that you'll have less sickness and you'll have more clarity in your mind if you move to a plant-based food supply. But whether you do that or if you do that, it's your choice. This is just something that you can see that because of not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, you'll notice that there's sickness and illness in the body and there's more difficulties in the mind as well. And this is affecting our environment as well with lots of manufactured farming. It's starting to affect the climate as well. So this is something you might choose to look at some point in your practice. So do you guys have any questions on this first precept? No questions? Okay. I'm sorry for those of you guys online. I forgot to show you. There's the first precept. Okay, so now we'll go to the second one. The second one, the Buddha says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. So here he's giving you some different guidance, because when you're causing harm to others, this harm can come back to you. So if I was to steal somebody's car, I'm causing them harm, because now they can't go to work. They can't take their kids to school. They can't go to the grocery store and buy food and supplies that they need to sustain their life. So when you take things from people, this is going to cause harm to others, and now this harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha is helping you to see that it's unwise to steal. Then you can also apply this to not assuming something can be taken or used. Right? Like say I was in if I was in a college class and I was getting ready to hand in a paper, and there's a stapler on the desk of the professor, and I just walk in, the professor's not there, and I just start using the stapler. And let's just say the professor walks in and is like, hey, what are you doing? That's my stapler, right? Because they're attached maybe to their stapler, right? Well, in this situation, they're going to get angry. They're going to get frustrated. They don't realize it's from their attachment. They're associating that painful feeling with me. And now they might fail me on that paper, or they might fail me in the entire class. So what would be wiser is to check with your professor. Hey, do you mind if I use your stapler? And they might say yes, they might say no. And if they say no, then maybe you'll go get one from somewhere else, right? But just to assume that it can be used would be unwise, right? So it's wise to ask people permission to use certain things, and this is going to keep you safe. Because what the Buddha is teaching you to do is not only to awaken your mind and get to this peaceful and joyful mental state through acquiring wisdom, but he's teaching you how to navigate a world of a bunch of unenlightened beings. Because if people are attached to all the different things in their life and you just start using them, people are going to get angry and frustrated. They're going to start wanting to attack you and cause harm to you. Also, notice the Buddha says, accepting what is given. Right? What he's talking about here is that when someone's practicing generosity with you, it's wise to accept that, right? Because if someone's practicing generosity, it's enhancing the quality of their mind. And if you accept their generous gift, it's helping them to train their mind to let go. So if somebody gives you a gift, the Buddha just teaches you to accept it. But remember, it's not black and white, because if someone offers you crystal methamphetamine or heroin, you're not going to accept that, right? You're going to be like, whoa, I don't know that I want that. I'm not interested in carrying that around. So it's not black and white. You need to be able to look at this. But if grandma gave you that sweater at Christmas time and you're like, I'm never going to wear that sweater, just accept it. Right? Grandma's practicing generosity, just accept it. And now what you do is you give it to somebody else. Rather than let it sit in your closet and just waste away, you can actually give it to somebody else. And then ultimately it might go through 3, 10, 15 different hands, and it'll find somebody that's going to ultimately use it. And they're like, wow, this is the best sweater I've ever seen. I'm going to wear it every day, right? Rather than wasting away in the closet. So this is helpful for grandma's mind, and it's also helpful for your mind. Now, if grandma got angry or frustrated or agitated that you gave it away, that's her craving. She's causing that herself. You didn't cause that, right? She didn't practice pure generosity. So if this sweater has to go through 5 or 10 different hands, those people are all practicing generosity, and that's really beneficial for everybody's mind. Then notice the Buddha says, awaiting what is given. What he's talking about here is that it's unwise to put your expectations on other people and wanting them to get you something specific. Like say you have a life partner who's going away on a business trip. If you were like, oh, honey, get me this and get me that and get me this, you're burdening that person with your expectations of what you want from that person. And now they're going around that town trying to find all the things that you want from them. And then when they come back, if they don't have everything you want, you'll get mad, you'll get frustrated, you'll get agitated. So the Buddha teaches you not to put your expectations on people about what you want from them. Just await what is given. If somebody gives you something, wonderful. If they don't, that's fine too. right? No harm, no foul. That's why when you're in a temple like this, you won't see a plate going around asking everyone for donations, because it's up to you. If you would like to help and support what's going on here, it's your decision. We have no expectation of wanting anything from you. We're just here to practice generosity and share the teachings that are going to help you. So awaiting what is given is what the Buddha is teaching you. That way it protects your mind so you don't get upset and angry and frustrated. Whereas if you have expectations that somebody will give you something, you will get frustrated and agitated when you don't get that thing. So any questions here on this one? No? Okay. So now we go to the third one. This one is usually translated as no sexual misconduct, but it's actually much deeper than that. The Buddha is giving you all the guidance of understanding how you could potentially harm somebody through sexual misconduct. So I'm going to read it to you and then we'll apply it so you can see how to apply it. So here the Buddha says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relative, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. Okay, so he's giving you lots of details here. So he's talking here about not having sex with minors. That's what he's talking about with women and men who are protected by their relatives, right? If you were to have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child, this is very impactful to that person. They're being guided by their parents, and this is going to take them away from that learning and that growth and that development. And in most places in the world, you can see that the human laws match to the natural law of Kamma, that it's illegal to have sex with minors. But there's actually some places in the world where it's not illegal to have sex with a young child. But if you look at those kinds of societies where that's going on, those societies are really struggling. Their government, their economy, their educational systems, they're having a lot of difficulties with that because people are having sex when they're 8 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, and this is really problematic for that society. So this is why the Buddha is teaching you that, because there's this cause and effect, that it really impacts the mind in a significant way, and it's unwise to be having sex that early in life. Notice where he says, whose violation entails a penalty. That's sex without consent. If we were to forcibly rape somebody, we're going to have difficulties, right? We're going to get harmed. We can get beat up. We can get murdered. We can go to jail. Forcing somebody to have sex would be unwise. So that's why the Buddha is teaching you that. Where the Buddha says abandoning unchastity, that's sex with multiple partners. What chastity is where you're not having sex with anybody. In ancient times, they used to have something called a chastity belt. I don't know if you guys know what this is. Fathers would have metal underwear for their daughters, and it had a lock and a key. And it was only the father that had the lock and the key. I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, what that must have felt like. But there were women who walked around with metal underwear, and nobody could have sex with his daughter unless he unlocked it. That would be chastity, right? That's one extreme. Unchastity is the opposite extreme, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you here when he says abandoning unchastity is he's teaching you not to have sex with countless people. And the reason why is because we experience sexually transmitted diseases. That's our harm. That's what's causing that. Instead, it's wise to have a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. And that's what's going to produce the best benefits in your life. If you were to go around and have sex with lots of different people, those people are going to get attached to you and to having sex. And this is where you can get injured, you can get beat up, there can be fights. Even people have been murdered over this kind of stuff. Not just sexually transmitted diseases, but people have been murdered over this kind of stuff. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to have the wisdom about, so you can avoid the sexually transmitted diseases, being murdered, and things like this. Sometimes people in a certain culture like Thailand and others, they meet a certain partner. And then when you meet that partner, you talk to your parents and you say, hey, we would like to move into the home, save up some money, and then go purchase our own home. Are you okay with that? And in that situation, your relatives have accepted the relationship and they understand that sex is part of it. So when the Buddha is talking here about avoid having sex with people who are protected by their family, essentially, he's not talking about these kinds of situations, because in this situation, the family has accepted the relationship. they've decided that, yes, you guys can move in and save up money, and then when you're ready, you go buy your own home. So if you're having sex in that situation, you're not causing harm to the parents because the parents, and also you're not causing harm to the partner because the parents have decided to agree to this situation. Okay. Sex with someone who has decided to be celibate. What this is where the Buddha is saying who are protected by teachings. For some people, depending on where they are in their growth on the path to enlightenment, they've decided to let go of sexual contact. They choose to no longer have sex. And if you were to have sex with someone like that, it's luring them away from their potential to be able to get to enlightenment. One of the best things in the world for an individual is to be able to get to enlightenment. It's also wonderful for the community at large too, because as somebody gets to enlightenment, they will have the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment and they can help other people. So if you were to have sex with somebody who was deciding to remain celibate, if you were trying to lure them away from that, it's causing harm to that person and it's causing harm to the community because that person isn't going to be able to then help others to understand what it takes to get to enlightenment. So here in Thailand, they make it really easy for you that anybody wearing an orange robe and shaving their hair, they're choosing not to have sex. Also, people who wear all white, they're choosing not to have sex either. That's not the reason why I wear white. I don't have sex anymore, but that's not why I chose to wear white, because no matter what, I wouldn't be interested in having sex at this point in my life. But nonetheless, you can understand that people who wear white, people who wear orange robes and things like this, they're choosing not to have sex. That way, if you're interested in having sex, you could choose a partner who's interested in having sex. So Thailand makes it really easy for you that way. Sex with people who are already committed in relationships, or sex outside of any relationship you are committed to. This is where the Buddha is talking about unchastity, but also where he's talking about or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement, or who have a husband and wife. That's what he's talking about. Someone who's in a relationship, if you were to have sex with that person, this is where, again, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered in these kinds of situations. This is the cause and effect, or the action and result, and he's showing you what that is. And then sex with people who are human trafficked. This would be someone who's like being forced to have sex, and now you're maybe paying for that. In this situation, if you're going into that kind of environment, again, sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed in those kinds of situations. Sometimes they'll put people out to human traffic them, and then they lure people to where they are, and then they kind of attack that person and rob them of all their money and whatever they have on them. So if you're going in that kind of environment where people are human trafficked, you're opening yourself up to these problematic situations. And now some other things like paid sexual services. Again, sexually transmitted diseases can happen here. You can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can experience getting robbed, both as a customer, but also as a sexual worker too. Oftentimes people who are doing sexual work, they end up getting beat up or murdered or robbed or raped or things like this. This can all occur. Notice that the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships here, because he understood that it doesn't cause harm, right? If there's a man and a woman that are choosing to have sex with each other, they're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. There's no harm there. But also, if two men or two women are in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship and they choose to have sex, they're not causing harm to anybody. Sometimes nowadays, people's minds are craving for every man to have sex with a woman or every woman to have sex with a man. And when they don't get their craving fulfilled, they get angry. And where this is coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. That's what we were just talking about with the craving, anger, and ignorance. But here, the Buddha is explaining to you the natural laws. He's explaining to you the wisdom that two loving, loyal, consenting adults choosing to have sex with each other, they're not causing harm to anybody. And as I was talking about yesterday, if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, it's not possible for every man or every woman to be interested in having sex with someone of the opposite gender. If that was true, then there would be no such thing as the universal truth of impermanence. So if you prefer same-gender relationships, or people who do, It's completely normal. It's been going on since the beginning of time. There's no way that ever there's been a time where every single man has had sex with a woman or every single woman has had sex with a man. It just doesn't happen. And even during the lifetime of the Buddha, he talks about same-gender relationships, essentially, that he describes this in his teaching. So he was aware of it. But when he was talking about it here, he didn't include it because he knew that it doesn't cause harm, because it's a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. So he understood this 2,500 years ago. This is how wise of a person he was. Nowadays, we have plenty of people that don't understand that in the world. They think that there's something wrong with the same-gender relationship. But here in Thailand and other places, they understand that this is just completely normal and there's no harm. Right? So you can understand that through the teachings of the Buddha. Same thing with transgender individuals. You can understand this through the teachings of the Buddha. Because remember, he taught you the way the world is, not the way the world should be. So with a transgender individual, there's a body that is of one gender, and then the mind is identifying as a different gender. This is completely normal. If every single body that had male sexual organs, the mind identified as a male, this would be permanence, right? That doesn't exist. Or if every single female that had female sexual organs, their mind identified as a female, that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence, so it's not possible for this to have occurred. Or if you think about the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been different animals and different beings in the past, we were different genders at different times in the past. So even though the mind is ending up in a male body, for example, the mind could have been many different females in the past. And now the mind ending up in a male body, the mind can identify as a female, even though it has male sexual organs. And the same thing is true for a woman, right? So in this situation, it's completely normal that these things are occurring. We can understand it through the universal truth of impermanence, and we can also understand it through the cycle of rebirth. It's completely normal. But again, there's people in the world that have craving. They want every person that has male sexual organs to identify as being male. And then if they don't get that, when they see a transgender individual, they get angry, they get hateful, their hate arises. And where this is coming from is the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. But here you can see true reality, that the body is one thing, the mind is something different, and these aren't going to necessarily identify as being the same. And this is completely normal. Okay? Sometimes people ask me about masturbation. So I'll share with you about masturbation. Sometimes people see it as all wonderful or all horrible, but there's a gray area here that you need to be able to see. Masturbation can be beneficial in some situations, but it can also be harmful. It really depends on what it is that you're using it for. If you're using masturbation to decrease your sensual desire, this can actually be helpful. But also masturbation can increase your sensual desire too. I'll give you some examples. Let's just say somebody has 5 or 10 boyfriends or girlfriends, and they hear me talking about sexual misconduct, and they're like, you know what? I should bring this down to one person. This is really unwise for me to have 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends. So now they might decide they would like to have just one, right? But they have this high sexual craving, right? And maybe they use some masturbation in the meantime to bring down that craving. So rather than going out and having sex with 5 or 10 different people in the course of a week, they might decide, you know what, I'm just going to have one partner, and when those sexual urges arise, I'm going to use some masturbation to decrease that a bit. And this is actually helpful. Or let's just say somebody was interested in raping somebody, and they say, you know what, I'm going to masturbate instead. This is helpful. This is beneficial, right? But there could be a situation where someone's masturbating excessively, maybe 10, 15, 20 times a day. And if this was occurring, this is increasing your sensual desire. And now it's harming your own mind. So you need to be alert to that and attentive to that, and look at how you're using it and decide what you're going to use it for. So when you decide to eliminate sexual cravings 100%, if you decide to do that, you might need some masturbation to help you through that and to gradually ease it out of the mind. So masturbation can be used in a helpful way, but it can also be harmful as well, depending on how it's being used. Sex with animals is one of those black and white things. You very rarely see this when you're looking at these kinds of things, but it's clear. An animal can't give us consent to have sex with it. And I imagine if somebody tried to do that, they could get injured. There could probably be diseases and illnesses and things like this that occur. Sometimes people ask me about pornography. With pornography, this is the mind having craving for certain imagery or certain interactions. And oftentimes when you go down into that, your mind kind of goes into a fantasy world. And even if you decide to come out of that, it's really hard to have satisfying sexual experiences with an actual person because your mind has been so deep down into this fantasy world. So if you have a craving for sexual contact, I would encourage you to go towards an actual living being and have sex with a human being, because that's going to cultivate a relationship with that person and you'll be able to develop a nice relationship rather than turning to pornography, because this is just going to take your mind deeper and deeper into craving, desire, attachment, and it's going to be very hard to come out of that. You can eliminate any kind of pornography addiction, and there's training that can help you to be able to accomplish that. And sometimes people talk to me about this privately, and then I help them to understand how to do it. But if you choose to go down the path of pornography, it's just going to produce more and more craving in the mind. And then you're also supporting other people having unchastity. So it would be wise to go towards an actual real life partner. So any questions on this third precept? No questions? Okay. These are all pretty straightforward, right? All right. So this one's really straightforward. Number 4, the Buddha says, abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So oftentimes people translate this as no lying, right? So here the Buddha is giving you a lot more detail, a lot more information of why it's important not to lie, because you're interested in being a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy and dependable. Because as you lie, people discover those lies in your personal life, in your professional life. They might not say anything to you, but they discover those lies. And now you're not considered to be dependable. So when that new project comes up at work, you're the last person that they're going to think about, right? So if you're trustworthy and dependable and reliable, people know, hey, when this person talks, they speak the truth. You're going to build a reputation for that. And it's going to help you both personally and professionally as well. And also, if you're looking to get to a peaceful and joyful mind, how could you do that if you're lying? Because if you've ever done a lot of lying, you might notice that your mind is obsessively thinking, what did I tell this person? What did I tell that person? What did I tell this person? You got to keep all your lies straight. And this is really challenging for the mind, and your mind can almost become obsessive. So if you're looking to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state and you just speak the truth, you don't ever have to worry about anything because you just always speak the truth. The Buddha understood this so well that he didn't even tell a joke that was a lie. You might not associate a Buddha as someone who tells a joke, but a Buddha tells jokes. A Buddha has fun, right? An enlightened being has fun. Oftentimes you see these pictures of him in meditation looking all somber, but a Buddha has a personality. They have a character. They're going to laugh. They're going to joke. They're going to have fun. They're going to do those kinds of things. But when they tell jokes, they tell truthful jokes. It's actually a lot harder, a lot more challenging to tell jokes that are truthful. It's going to require a lot more wisdom from your own mind to be able to do that. But you know what? Those jokes are usually a lot funnier, right? When someone's put a lot of thought into a joke and it's actually a true joke, it's actually usually quite funny. It's unwise to joke people in degrading and disparaging ways, to degrade others or to degrade yourself. I don't recommend that. But there's truthful jokes that you can make. So here you can see a teaching from the Buddha where he's teaching his son, Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and never came back, but actually he came back. And his son, his wife, his stepmother, a lot of his family members came and joined him and actually got to enlightenment. So here he's teaching his son to not tell a joke that has a lie in it, that it would be unwise to do so. If you can imagine this person who's very wise sharing the teachings that it takes to get to enlightenment, and in class like this, they're telling the truth, but then over the side over here, they're lying, you wouldn't know whether to trust that person or not when they're teaching you the teachings, right? So the Buddha always told the truth during his discourses, of course, but also in his private conversations where he's telling jokes, he's going to tell the truth there too, right? And then this is how you build more and more dependability and being a trustworthy and reliable person. So any questions here on this one? No questions? Let me check the internet. See if we have any questions. Hello to all you guys in internet world. If you guys have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask questions that you like. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm going to move on to number 5. This is the 5th precept. The Buddha says, refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. Well, if you're investigating the teachings and you're examining the teachings, the first thing you might ask yourself is, what is heedlessness? That's what I did. I was like, what is heedlessness? I had no idea what that word meant. So I needed to go look it up. And I looked it up, and this is what I came back with. It means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful, right? So rather than just trying to believe what this word means, really investigate and examine. What the Buddha is teaching you is that when you take substances that produce heedlessness, it's producing unmindfulness, lack of attentiveness, lack of alertness. So now if your mind is heedless, you're very likely to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, and to lie. Right? If you're interested in getting to enlightenment, you need to cultivate mindfulness. You need to have awareness of the mind, right? But if you're taking the mind in the direction of unattentiveness, unalertness, unmindfulness with a substance, you're walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment. So if somebody's interested in getting to enlightenment, they're interested in honing the mind and developing this optimal mind to perform well. And if you take substances that's causing heedlessness, this is walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment. So the Buddha is sharing this teaching with you, which is timeless. If you understand the word heedless, now and forever, any substance that is created, you can apply it using this precept, because the Buddha could have never envisioned all the different substances that we would have created. Something like PCP or LSD, these are chemically based. Chemicals didn't even exist pretty much during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he would have never given us an exhaustive list because he couldn't imagine what it is that we would have actually created. So he's providing you the general guidance that any substance that causes heedlessness is going to promote this lack of attentiveness and alertness, and now you're going to make unwise decisions. If you talk to people who are in jail or in prison, they might tell you they're there for murder or they're there for robbing a bank. But if you really question them and ask them closely, about 80% of them will tell you they're there because of a substance abuse problem, that they would have never robbed that bank if it wasn't for their substance abuse, or they would have never killed that person if they weren't high on some drug. So that's the real reason that's leading to all these unwise decisions, is that there's a certain amount of substances that cause heedlessness that an individual might take, and then it promotes unwise decision making. So here, I've just got a couple of substances that people ask me about frequently to be able to walk you through and so you can see how to apply this precept. This particular substance of marijuana, we know that it has medical benefits. It's unrefutable that there's certain medical benefits. There's children that have seizures like 20 times a day, and they give them a little bit of CBD oil on their tongue, and they don't have another seizure for like 6 months, just with one little drop on the tongue. So this substance surely has some medical benefits, but it can also be used for heedlessness too, right? So it depends how you're using it and why you're using it. If you're looking for the medical benefits, you're usually probably looking to an oil or an edible, right? Where if you're smoking it, it's going to cause harm to your lungs. Also, if you're looking for the medical benefits, you're probably looking for a high CBD, which the other part of the plant is THC. The THC is the part that causes the high. The CBD is the part that has the medical benefits. So you would like to look at those kinds of things. But be sure that you have a real true medical benefit and purpose for this particular substance. Because if it's just stress or anxiety, or if it's just difficulty sleeping or things like that, that's not going to get solved by marijuana. That's being caused by the craving, the desire, the attachments in the mind. You can eliminate your stress and anxiety through eliminating craving, desire, attachment. But marijuana is not going to do that for you. It's just going to kind of mute the feelings in the mind. So be sure that you have a real valid medical purpose, and then you look at how you're ingesting it. Is it an oil and an edible, or are you smoking it? Because if you're smoking it, it's going to cause harm to the lungs. Okay, so this one, you have to navigate that gray area. Then cigarettes, we know that there's no medical purpose here, right? And more people have figured this out. And this is why less and less people are smoking. But when people were smoking, this is where we saw a lot of lung cancer and a lot of problems. Even secondhand smoke can cause harm as well. So less and less people are smoking. If you're currently smoking, you might decide to slowly move away from that gradually, slowly but surely. That's going to help you to be able to experience improved results in your life. You're going to even need to look at prescription medications, because there's some prescription medications that can cause heedlessness, and they can be addictive. So if you get a prescription from a doctor, I encourage you to research that and look to see what that medication is and whether or not it can be addictive or not. Because if it is, you might be able to talk to your doctor, and there's another option that you could get. But in some situations, there might not be another option. And there you might need to ask your doctor, hey, I see that this is pretty addictive. Do I have to take this one? Is there any other options? And if there isn't, then okay, I'm going to have to take this medication, or I'm choosing to take this medication. And you might just try to hurry up and get off of it as soon as possible so that your mind doesn't get attached to it or hooked to it and have craving. You even need to look at your caffeine intake, because caffeine is a substance that causes heedlessness. It's a stimulant, right? And this is why if you choose to move away from caffeine, you're going to notice withdrawal symptoms. You're going to notice headaches. You might notice shakes. You might notice a dry mouth. These are all withdrawal. Just like a heroin person who's using heroin would go through withdrawal, a person who's withdrawing from caffeine, they're going to have withdrawal symptoms as well, because the caffeine is going to take your mind up into an excited state, and then you're going to drop down, right? You're going to go up in this high energy, and then you're going to lack energy, and you're going to drop off. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all throughout your day. So if you rely on caffeine to lift you up into an elevated state, that means your mind doesn't have the ability to cultivate this naturally. Then that means that when you don't have your caffeine, the mind's going to drop off down into a low lethargic state. So if you gradually move away from caffeine, it'll give your mind the ability to lift up its natural energy, so that by the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all day long. An enlightened being doesn't get tired. They don't get exhausted. With craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you'll get to the end of your day and you'll get exhausted. You'll feel like a real burden, like you're carrying around a burden on your shoulders. But if you're training your mind and you're allowing your mind to develop this natural energy, you can have energy from the time you wake up all day long. You'll get sleepy where you need to sleep, but you won't get exhausted or tired. But you won't be able to get to that natural energy if you rely on caffeine to lift you up, because then it's going to drop you back off. You even need to pay attention to your sugar intake. When we were children, we didn't have that wisdom, so we probably used to eat a lot of sugar, and we went into the sugar high, right? And then we dropped off from that. So you're going to need to even look at that and make sure you're not eating excessive amount of sugar. Some people will tell you psychedelic substances are going to help you to get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. What psychedelic substances do is they promote this introspection where you look inward, and it can kind of mimic being introspective, and it's induced by this substance. But in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to cultivate that naturally so that you can be introspective at all times during your day. Because there's going to be certain situations that occur where you're going to need to look inward and figure out, what should I do in any given situation? But if you can only be introspective when you take a substance, then you're not cultivating that naturally in the mind. So taking a psychedelic substance is kind of like window shopping, and you look inside the store and you see this beautiful product inside the store, but you can't go in and touch it and feel it and purchase it because you're chained down to the sidewalk outside. That you might see this beautiful purse or this beautiful handbag or this beautiful shoes inside the store, but you can't actually go in and touch it and feel it. So it's the same thing, that these psychedelic substances mimic a little bit of what it means to be introspective, and the mind can look inward at itself, but you never actually get a chance to have it permanently because the mind hasn't cultivated that introspection permanently. So taking a psychedelic substance is not going to lead to your enlightenment. An enlightened being doesn't need psychedelic substances. So if you see those kinds of things, it's not actually true. It's not going to lead to your enlightenment. It's going to actually keep you in the unenlightened state because it's promoting heedlessness, and you're not able to actually experience the cultivation of introspection. So any questions on this fifth precept? No question. Oh, you have a question? Yeah.
Agree with this, but there are some schools of thought and philosophy, like utilitarians, that say, oh, as long as you're able to do no harm to yourself or anyone, an action is considered good. For example, if you tell a lie that ends up like benefiting yourself and the other person, then it is considered morally good. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so someone might call this like a white lie or something like this, right? Any kind of lie, it's based in craving, desire, attachment. It's the mind wanting something. And if I tell the truth, I'm not going to get what I want. So therefore, any kind of lie is actually causing harm. And at the very least, it's causing harm to your own mind because there's still a craving, desire, attachment there. So in order to get to a point where you're practicing and you're not having craving, desire, attachment, you need to be able to tell the truth. And telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know. One of the examples people give me on this particular thing is they say, what if somebody runs into my house because someone's trying to murder them, and they run into my house and they're hiding, and then this soldier shows up at my front door and says, is such and such at your house? Am I supposed to tell the truth? Well, the answer is yes, you should always tell the truth, but that doesn't mean you tell everything you know, right? So if a soldier came to my door and said, hey, David, is this person, in your house? I would say, did you see that person? Are they outside? Where are they? I would kind of redirect them to somewhere else. I wouldn't say, yes, they're hiding under my sofa. You can go kill them now, right? I wouldn't say that, but telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know. Or say like you have a life partner who's like, honey, what do you think? How do I look? Right? Maybe you're going out on the town or something and they're wearing a certain set of clothing and they're like, hey, how do I look? Well, you don't need to say like, oh, you look horrible. You should change those clothes right now. You don't need to say that, because what the person has done is they've chosen to purchase this particular clothes, or it was given to them, and they obviously like it, or else they wouldn't have put it on. What they're looking for is some confidence, and they're looking for you to get that confidence. So what I would say in that situation is I would say, you know what? I enjoy spending time with you no matter what you wear. Let's just go have a good time. Right? I'm not even going to say anything about their clothes because it doesn't matter, right? Whatever they're choosing to wear is up to them. So rather than say, oh, you look horrible, you should change that right now, or rather than lying and saying, oh, you look so great, you look wonderful. No need to say either one of those things. Instead, give them the confidence and say, hey, I enjoy your smile. I think when you wear your smile, you look beautiful. Let's go out and have a good time, or whatever you choose to say, right? So telling the truth doesn't mean that you tell everything you know, right? And this is the way you can navigate the truth and make sure that you're always speaking the truth. Because anytime you tell a lie, it is causing harm. Okay. All right. So I don't see any other questions. Oh, Rachel, you have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
I have a question on prescription medications. Usually people have little knowledge of medications because medicine is a specific professional field. We go to hospital and we just take what is given or prescribed by the doctor. So what else can we do, or what kind of effort can we make in terms of the medications?
Yeah, we live in a very interesting time that we live in the information age, right? They have the industrial age, they have all those different things. We live in the information age where everything's at your fingertips. So if you're prescribed a medication, you can get on the internet and Google it or whatever search engine you use, and it'll help you to be able to see about this medication, and you'll be able to see whether it's addictive or not. So anytime I'm prescribed a medication, which isn't very often nowadays, I will research it before I actually take it to make sure that I understand what it is and how it's going to affect me and what are the side effects and things like this. And that way, slowly but surely, you learn about these different medications. And then wherever you see that one is potentially addictive, that's where you can have a consultation with your doctor and ask them if there's another option. So that's what I would suggest for you. If you don't have the understanding of the medications, is do some research and figure it out.
The focus is to check whether there is something addictive in the medication, yes?
If you Google, I'm sorry,
focus.
I thought you were done. If you do a search on a name of a medication, it will tell you whether it's addictive or not, and it'll tell you those kinds of things. So you can read about it, and they'll explain that to you.
And another question is about psychedelic substances. I recently heard a talk, or listened to a talk, is about people using, or healers, therapists using psychedelic substances, for example, some mushrooms, to help with trauma healing. I'm not sure. I don't know much about this, but I think it's a new field, or it's something. It's a new therapy or new techniques in therapy. May I know your opinion on this?
Yeah, what trauma is the mind is holding on and it's clinging. And the way to eliminate that is train your mind to let go. So you can train in that through the path to enlightenment. A psychedelic substance isn't going to train the mind of how to let go. So while somebody might experience some temporary relief by taking a psychedelic substance, the mind still hasn't been trained to let go. So therefore, any situation that you're encountering where the mind's holding on, the mind hasn't learned to let go yet. So you haven't really produced a long-term solution. You're just kind of putting a little Band-Aid on it. So if you turn to a psychedelic substance and you think you're healing trauma, you're not actually really solving the core problem, which is the mind holding on. The psychedelic substance isn't going to fix that.
Okay. And the last question is about the previous talk, awaiting what is given. And what's the difference between awaiting what is given and making the right effort? For example, if someone wants to do a project or start a business or do marketing, and he or she awaits people to come to her, or should she or he makes the right effort? And what is the right effort, or what's the proper way to make the marketing?
Yeah, so you can advertise for things, and that is awaiting what is given, because you're just notifying and letting people know what it is that you're doing. And then if they choose to come learn, like here in Chiang Mai, I have signs out at the temple that says, hey, we have classes and here's where you can come, and we have a website and things like this. Those are people that are choosing to look for those things. And then when they see those signs, they're choosing to come to the class, for example. So awaiting what is given means that you don't put your expectations on someone to give you something specifically. But putting a sign out or advertising a product or service that you have and inviting people to come use that product or service, that's still awaiting what is given. You haven't put your expectations on anybody that they will give you anything.
What about reaching out to people like some companies does? Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say again?
Activity. What about reaching out to people through activities or through messages or something like this?
Okay, so reaching out like a phone call and like cold calling or spam or things like this. I don't advise that kind of stuff. That's unwise, because you'll build up a reputation for yourself of people knowing that you're just craving, wanting things. Instead, I wouldn't do those kinds of things. I don't do those kinds of things. I just put out signs. I put out a website. There's notifications in the community that community members know that I'm here teaching classes, and the word spreads naturally. If you're doing something good and you're doing something wonderful in terms of selling a product or a service, the word will spread. People will know about what you do. You might need to do some advertising to get started and get going, but after that, the word will spread that people are be really interested in what it is that you're doing. So I wouldn't suggest doing cold calls and spamming people and stuff like that, that people will see those kinds of things and they're going to just start to ignore you, and you're not going to be able to, have customers that are taking you seriously, because they'll just feel like all you want is money, because they're craving, buy now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome. Okay, so what I'm going to do is end our class here. It's 12:30, which this is normally when we finish this particular talk. And today, this afternoon, I'm going to be teaching you walking meditation. And walking meditation only takes me about 10 or 15 minutes to teach it to you. And then we'll probably do it for about 20 minutes or so. And then we'll have a little conversation about it. So we can actually start at 2 o'clock for our walking meditation. So if you guys would like to take an hour and a half lunch break and then come back at 2 o'clock, I'll teach you walking meditation. Okay, so enjoy your lunch and we'll see you afterwards. Okay, same for you guys online as well.